Welcome to the Freddie Kissoon Show. All I'm saying, next time, break the evidence. All you do, you come here, all the corruption.
How come
Just here. Next time you come, break your I am not talking about that. I'm talking about you in 2024, December, saying there's corruption. Bring it.
Let me ask you this question. I would like to ask the AG to propose legislation for what we call small claims court. There are lots of poor people, to an example you just gave, that they have issues with others and sometimes with large firms, but the lawyer fee is greater than the fee you're claiming.
It is their right. Unlike the right that someone has, all of our rights exist in context.
What's the context of a second medical opinion?
Because you disrespected the process.
No.
Jesus, this is common sense, man.
Any situation which you seem to do, you're just dealing with Afro-Guyanese issues. If one, you can't bring and pull the leaders of the African community together, you're failing them. And if two, you can't put forward a future, a blueprint, and a plan for African Guyanese, you're failing as well.
Good evening. Pleasant Wednesday night to you, wherever you are. Good evening, good night, good afternoon, good morning, based on time zone. Good evening, good night, good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to the Freddie Kissoon Show. This edition, which we started a few months ago, is called the Kissoon-Craig Dialogue, in which Leonard and I discuss society's contents, Guyanese society contents. As you know, we're in election campaign, and we're going to take as much time as possible on the show to bring to you our evaluations, articulations, elaborations on the election campaign. Once again, thanks for being with us. Leonard Craig is next to us. There is no guest. There will be a guest Friday evening. There's no guest tonight. It's the Craig Kissoon Dialogue, in which we analyze social phenomena. Once again, thanks for being with us. I want to start with a recommendation that you go online, if you don't have the printed copy, and read last Monday's column in the Guyana Chronicle by Leonard Craig. Here it is. This is good reading for people who have entered politics and want to have a future in politics. It's a good analysis about the intrinsic, endemic fault lines, line faults in organizations that after a while on the scene deceive people. Once again, Craig's article, AFC, Traces of Treachery. Now what Craig did there is to show from the beginning the AFC was into from the time it was formed. This was no straightforward principled organization. There was always Machiavellian conspiracies, there was always backstabbing, there was always treacherous outlays. I'm going to give you some examples of Craig's experience in the AFC and his discovery of these treacheries. He said, one, there was the formation at the formation there was Kamraj Ramjatan, Raphael Trotman and Sheila Holder. They belonged to three different parties and they formed the AFC. But Trotman didn't resign from the PNC. Ramjatan didn't resign from the PPP. Holder didn't resign from the AFC. Now those are things we need to look at as we talk about challenges and a whole set of things since then. Then he gives another example. The two founders, Trotman and Ramjatan, decide they would rotate the presidential candidacy. So 1 year for one election season for Trotman, another election season for Ramjatan. But when Ramjatan time came in 2011, Trotman said, no, I want to be the presidential candidate. Although they agreed in 2005, he would be it, and then it was Ramjatan. So Craig goes on and on and on to show some very, very nasty subterfuge inside the AFC. When he comes on, he will tell you about some more of them. But why I feature this article is because I think Craig, in his embedment in the AFC, may have missed some things that were going on at a lower level that were equally treacherous. And I want to give a couple examples of that and go on to Craig. First, I want to talk to you about the 2011 election campaign, in which the FC brought a manager from New York, a guy named Nazaruddin. And that guy told us on the Freddie Kissoon show when we were walking out that the AFC mulatto Creole class had a problem with Ramjatan. They wanted the party to be a quintessential mulatto Creole party. But Ramjatan came dark skinned and Hindu. But even though they didn't want Ramjatan, Ramjatan settled in and performed his own treachery. Now, here is an interesting, complex part of the AFC's history. Ramjatan became the leading Indian in the AFC, and he began to bring in other Indians, particularly from Barbados, and he began to get Indian money from entrepreneurs in and outside of Guyana. But Ramjatan made sure, because of his tenuous position, he remained numero uno among the Indians. Excuse me. This is what Gerhard Ramsarup told me. Ramsarup told me that Ramjatan cut down any Indian that was rising. And Gerhard Ramsarup was a big threat, because guess why? He was half white. He was Indian and white, but he looked white. Now, if the AFC is a mulatto Creole class, Ramsarup will rise. The mulatto Creole class will elevate Ramsarup over Ramjatan. And Ramsarup was very, 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 very welcomed by the people of Guyana wherever the AFC went. And Ramsarup told me Ramjatan just cut him down. One of the big Indian names in the AFC, because he had a high profile with the PPP, was Vijinja Bisesar. We sat down in the National Park and Bisesar told me any Indian with a high profile, Ramjatan would cut them down. So that is a part of the treachery that Leonard did not put in his article. But because he probably didn't have access to Ramsarup and Bisesar telling him these things. But I know these things because those two persons told me. There were other aspects of treachery that is not here, but you can't expect Ramjatan, you can't expect Craig to put everything. A Canadian man was paying to have a general manager, have a paid general manager, AFC. And Ramsarup decided he will apply for it. And Ramjatan cut him down. Ramjatan cut him down and give it to Noel Holder. But I don't want to go on, but I think if you're in politics, you should read this. It's about how organizations start out with a good name, but you don't know the business that the public don't know what goes on inside there. And we should be careful with all these new parties that are being formed. Do we know them? Do we know who's Azharuddin Mohammed? I will tell you about him and the cars that he owned, that in Guyanese money is hundreds of millions. But I've spoken too long. Let me bring it quick.
Just a quick response to Freddie. I did say in that article, and which is something anybody who reads it must underscore, that if I am not sure something was already in the national domain, it might not be in the national consciousness, but if I wasn't sure it was in the national domain, I didn't write about it. I am not one, and Freddie knows this, who brings new things to the public that was supposed to be part of the party's evolution, unless it becomes absolutely necessary. Those things that I outlined are things in one way or the other already in public domain. All I did is just put it as a compendium. For example, I started by showing that when the AFC was formed, Ramjatan belonged to the PPP, Trotman belonged to the PNC, Sheila Holder was a member of GAP, or a combination in Parliament of GAP WPA. That was a coalition, pre-election coalition. And they decided to form the AFC, and the AFC was formed, and they refused to resign their seat and leave Parliament. So that's nationally known. A lot of young people may not have known about it. So I, more or less rehashed. And then when we moved down, the fact that Trotman reneged on the agreement to rotate presidential candidacy is also in the public space. A lot of young people may not know of it. Again, it's a rehashing of history. The things that Freddie just mentioned, it's not that I don't know of it, but I do not know that it has been presented in the public in that way. And I do not want to present those things that are part of the internal AFC history. If it's already out there, I will try to analyze it and break it down.
One of them is out there.
Right?
Besessa gave me an interview that was published in the Kaicho News in my column.
Okay.
And he said Ramjatan was very insecure when it comes to the rise of any big Indian name. So that's
if you want my analysis on that, my analysis would be a slight pushback in the sense that because Ramjatan was the founder of the AFC, I think there was a place cemented for him forever and ever, amen, until he decides that, here, look, I am bowing out. That's the way I saw it, both for Ramjatan and Trotman. That's the way I saw it. So that no matter what happens, or no matter what position they get or do not get, that there's a place of authority that is reserved for them. And can't quite remember if it's in the Constitution per se, but I think it's a received theory and an understood position that is the case.
All right.
I never saw Ramjatan as having a need to feel threatened. That's just my.
Well.
I am not.
Right.
There is sufficient. Let me not say sufficient. There's plausible explanation for what you're saying, and I can arrive at the conclusion that you are making, but the other side also needs to be presented.
Well,
that's all I'm saying.
Ram Sarup told me that Ramjatan promised him a parliamentary seat, then he reneged on it. But Cesar was quite clear that working with Ramjatan, you saw the insecurity. Could a big Indian name rise up? And I think Ram Sarup, if anyone, could have threatened Ramchatan. It was simply because of the mulatto Creole penetration of this country. And Ramsurup looked like a white guy. I mean, he was not whole white because his father was Indian. But there's other things I wanted to say about the treachery that you may not have that you may have missed. And this one is in the public domain. I think that Indian lawyer was promised a parliamentary seat by Ramchatan. I can't remember her name, but you probably
Gomati Singh.
Gomati Singh. And then Trotman gave it to a female very close to him, and Gomati Singh made a big public cry about that and resigned. I mean, she said clearly that was as if they had won 5-6 seats, a parliamentary seat was promised to her, and this lady Chantel Smith came out of nowhere. There are other aspects of the treachery. Now, I campaigned like you for the AFC in 2015, and I couldn't understand the role of the consultant, Alson Stewart. When I go into that yard in that building, I never went to the top. I never wanted to go to the top where the big wigs are. It was clear to me that Alson Stewart was like the leader of the party. He gave orders, the party leaders deferred to him, and I have never seen in any party how a consultant can have that kind of power. I don't know if you want to comment on that. Aubrey Norton.
It's certainly an anomaly for political parties in Guyana. I don't know exactly what it was that caused the leaders of the party to defer to Stewart. But remember, Stewart spent years in the P.J. Patterson government in Jamaica. And he came to Guyana with a certain confidence, a certain authoritative confidence.
But he was a consultant.
That transmitted, you see, sometimes when you have that kind of personality, your position doesn't matter whether you're a consultant or what. When you have that kind of...
People default to you.
Yes, it penetrates people to the extent where they feel that they need to, and I believe it was his personality, and he had that kind of because even David Granger deferred to Stewart in the first Commonsburg Accord when we weren't getting, and this may be for the first time in the public domain, and I'm just mentioning it for context. When we weren't getting anyway, remember that Commonsburg Accord was February the 14th signed. February the 13th, the night or late afternoon before, everything was agreed upon, but they could not agree on 12 seats. I think Granger was preferring 8 or 9 seats, something in that region. And the team that was assembled to negotiate couldn't get past. Everything else was agreed, but they couldn't get past that one thing. And as far as I understand it and I remember it, Alston Stewart, probably in a room with a leader or two, picked up the phone and gave Granger a call. And with that authoritative type of voice that transmits this kind of confidence, he spoke to Granger and he said, "Boss, you want to be president or not? You're gonna let 3 or 4 seats come between you and being president?"
Okay.
And when he said that, Granger capitulated almost immediately and said, "Okay, 12 seats, let's sign this thing." And the next day the agreement was signed.
Well, I've got something to reveal to the public about the first days of the AFC in power, and it has never been written, never been said. This is the first time now this is coming out. I can't tell you the man inside the APNU WPA AP at that time, WPA was part of APNU, was in the government. My information comes from someone very, very high in the WPA who worked in the APNU government in 2015. Now listen to this and take your mind back to what I'm about to tell you. The APNU AFC government won the election in May, and in that same month set about to rule Guyana and named their ministers. The Minister of Natural Resources was Rupert Rupnerine, and a mining pit caved in, and Rupert Rupnerine is in the Chronicle, in the papers, in his capacity as Minister of Natural Resources, dressed in relevant gear, his long boots, visiting the pit. Weeks after, Rupert Rupnerine, without any explanation, became the Minister of Education, who moved Rupnerine from natural resources to education.
Just for context before you continue, hold the thought. Something you're missing. Granger swore in his ministers in 2 tranches. There was a first set. The others were given an idea of what portfolio they would be in. And after the first tranche was sworn in, Rupert Rupnerine was part of the second tranche, and he was identified to be, but he wasn't the minister.
But
he started,
and he went to the pit with it.
Right. So he started immersing himself in the work.
Okay.
That's the context.
All right. A very, very high person in government, in the leadership of the WPA, told me Alsum Strout recommended that the natural resource go to AFC, and he also made some comment historically why it would not be wise to have Rupert Rupnerine. I want to go on to say why Strout said that, but Strout could sue me for libel if I say why Strout wanted Rupert Rupnerine out. But I will leave it at that. Those of you who want to research it, you can see Rupert Rupnerine visiting the mining pit with his long boots and his safety helmet. But those were some of the early treacheries of the AFC and the APNU AFC government. We could continue with that because I think history, Guyana's historiography is being widened here. We're adding to Guyana historiography. But we are on the election campaign, and I want to say this. That's Craig could say what he believes. This is what I believe. I don't think if the APNU and the AFC, whether jointly or separately, win the election in 2025, the 1st of September, I do not think they will hold a free and fair election in 2030. That is it. And I am going to use my columns, and if I'm asked to speak, I am going to use my columns, and I'm going to advocate that people be very, very careful in voting the APNU, AFC into power. We're not going to have elections. Free and fair elections. We may not have election in 2030. That is my belief, and I am going to advocate it in the society from now on until there's elections.
I wouldn't specifically now go that far. We would have to observe, let's assume by any wild stretch of the imagination that an APNU AFC coalition could even happen, that's one, and that they could even win. It's a stress. So what we're doing here is more an exercise of wild imagination.
But I'm expressing my belief too.
Yes. I would prefer to observe their actions for the first year, 2 years, and see what happens before thing, because I believe that the international community, the even CARICOM, the tolerance for rigged election, as we saw in 2020, the tolerance for it is going lower and lower. The tolerance in the courts is lower and lower for these things. And so I believe that anybody contemplating that would really be crazy to do that. And so that would be my initial reaction to that. Not that I am trying to cut across your opinion, but just that I believe that lessons were learned from 2020, and a lot of the people who even supported the movement may not want to go back there. They may not want to, thing. So, that would be my...
Okay, there are things that have to go into Guyana's historiography, and those things are being put on this table right now. We got to move on. We've got lots of time there, but let's stick with this article here that you should read. I showed you it, and I will show you it again. It's very good in terms of how political parties, you have to be very careful with them when they are formed and they promise you the earth, the moon, the skies, the oceans, right? Moses Nagamutu has a very interesting autobiography. And there's a part of that autobiography that is kind of sad about how Nagamutu felt the AFC treated him when the AFC got into power. He said he knew he was, in many cases, he was being sidelined. So before they got power, certain meetings he wasn't invited to. That's because he's a newcomer, he just joined the AFC. The AFC has their founders and what have you. And he said that in that autobiography that he didn't want to push his weight. And he felt that went over even when they got into power. Clearly, he said that he was carefully sidelined before power in 2015 and after power. And I think what is sad about that is Nagamutu, in fact, caused the AFC to be in power in 2015. I think that Nagamutu brought in the votes in 2011, and that Nagamutu brought in the votes to the AFC. Well, I mean all the votes, but at the crucial time, and his votes counted. And you would have thought that they would have all relied on Nagamutu, but maybe Craig was right. Those leaders say the party is their own. Nagamutu's a latecomer, and he has to know his place. I'm taking it that you have Nagamutu's autobiography.
Yeah, and I read it. My comment on that is, one, I think Nagamutu had traces of what you call this thing when you feel inferiority complex. I think he has traces of that. And you can see it in his book, where, and even when he talk about his sojourn in the PPP, you can see that he has traces of inferiority complex.
Yeah. He feels he's not up to scratch to those he met.
Right, and he felt like you feel a lack of confidence in his writing and the way he approached things. For example, that fight that ensued between himself and Ramjatan for the prime ministerial position. If Nagamutu had self-confidence, Nagamutu will come. What he did was absent himself from executive meetings. If you have self-confidence, you come to the meeting look at people in their eyes and provide cogent reason why you should continue, and if you continue again as prime ministerial candidate, people may not accept it, but that is your reason, right, Freddie?
Yeah.
And use your years of experience in politics to kind of bring people with you to see your point of view, and all of that. Just come to the meeting, face people straight up, and say, guys, 1 to 10 are the reasons why you should continue with me. Further, I'm making a commitment here that after 2 years, 3 years, 1.5 years, whatever, I will hand over to Kemraj. I recognize him as a founder. He deserves whatever, but we believe we can win if I am the head of the AFC ticket, along with Granger. And perhaps we may have had a different result with respect to that. But what Nagamutu did was stay away and use agents to instigate various different schemes to try to get him to be the candidate. Another example of Nagamutu's inferiority complex, or traces of it, is when we won in 2015, when the election was won in 2015. Granger requested, or at least that is what is being said inside of the AFC. Granger has not said so himself, but based on how we understand it in the AFC, Granger asked Nagamutu to establish his office in the complex of the office of the president. Up until that time, Nagamutu is the only prime minister in the history of Guyana who has consented to that.
Yeah, I spoke to him about that and tell him stop it. I remember telling him that, but yeah, the man had a problem.
Nagamutu could not assert himself and say, no, this has never happened. On top of that, you are causing the AFC to appear as
an appendage.
Yeah, an appendage, as a child, as a schoolboy to the headmaster. So the headmaster got to keep his eyes, you know, on this troublesome child all the time. And elements in the AFC and the AFC executive told Nagamutu, no, don't do it. But Nagamutu insisted because Granger asked. And I believe that that shows a guy who is not assertive. And had Nagamutu been assertive, or allowed, at the very least, allow the AFC to be assertive on his behalf. A person in the AFC who I find to be very assertive, right or wrong in some situations, but very assertive, is David Patterson. And David Patterson is very, very assertive and was willing to carry the charge with the backing of the executive to say Nagamutu must not be there and what have you, but Nagamutu killed that, right? And those are some of the things that express, you know, that kind of thing. And I believe if that assertiveness was there from the beginning, and I think, let me just say this before you come in. If that assertiveness, if Nagamutu had a brand of assertiveness that was transmitted to the population, that was transmitted to the Indo-Guyanese population, that swing that happened, that 1% swing that swung back to the PPP, that gave PPP the 1-seat majority, may not have happened. Because people looked to Nagamutu to be the great unifier, to be the savior even perhaps. Because remember, East Indian people look at the PNC, the APNU, as not the party to represent their interests. So the next best thing is at least our interest is going to be represented by the person with the highest authority
But
in
if
the
you
AFC, which
you know
was Nagamutu.
you have latched on to something, and I'm glad we do these programs. And when we started it, I wanted what we said here to become part of Guyana's historiography. I sat down, and I don't know how viewers are going to view this, but this is the first time a political analyst, political activist is speaking about the inferiority complex of Moses Nagamutu. And what I am going to say here will cause viewers to say, come on, Freddie, you're putting on the one. I sat next to my dog on the seawall and read Nagamutu's autobiography out. And when I'm going through it, I said to myself, oh, why are you allowing him to do, why are they allowing him to do this? Why he's allowing them to do this to him? That is during his time in the PPP in the 70s and 80s. He's talking about Congress. This is a big guy who's one of the faces of the PPP.
Yeah.
And when you read his autobiography, when he goes into Congress, he can't get this done. This body shut him down. And you should hear the people who is naming who have shut him down, not as half as big as him in the PPP. And the autobiography is a lamentation of how he was treated in the PPP, although he was one of the biggest names in the PPP outside of Chetty Jagan and Janet Jagan. In fact, he said when Jagan was in Upununi and people asked him about the successor, Jagan turned and said, why we worried about that? Look, we got Comrade Moses here. So I think you've latched on to something which analysts should take up. Maybe the guy had an intrinsic inferiority complex. His autobiography spells it out, although Nagamutu doesn't know it.
Right. Lots of folks may not want to admit, but just go over his entire political career, and you will see traces of it throughout. You'll see traces of it throughout. I'm not saying that there weren't times when he, put his own brand and his own stamp on things, but throughout there are those traces of, a person who feels inferior.
No,
to
he really. I have examples of that, and it really broke my heart. I remember I was at the gas station when he called me to tell me the app news dismissing you from the Ghana Broadcasting Authority. Where can I find him? This is what they said. They're moving against him. They're moving, and he was your boss, he's in charge. So they have to tell him, we don't want Craig, and he has to say, look, this is my area.
Right.
I wrote about that thing.
Because during that time I asked Nagamutu directly, are you second guessing your own choice? And I said, if I know that you're second guessing, I will resign. You don't have to wait for an event. Once I know that you say, and he said to me, no, I am not second guessing. I am very, very sure about your competence. Nagamutu said that to me. And yet he allowed, the APNU to put their stamp on,
looking back at him, he damaged Guyana, he damaged he damaged politics. I was so irritated. I did three installments of review of his autobiography. Anyway, let's move on. We interviewed Kit Nascimento in his backyard, and he said he fears that the opposition is going to create instability in the forthcoming election, because he said they just know there's nothing to look forward to. They're going to lose. You said you don't think they have the capacity to do that. But look what happened on April the 28th after Adriana Youngfather started to cry and said, this is not the post-mortem results I wanted. So could you still cling to your thing that there's all
right, so this is it. They are always there is always that capacity in people. Remember, people have a capacity for both good and evil. And I'm by no means saying that the PNC, APNU, or the opposition, generally speaking, does not have the absolute capacity. I was speaking relatively to disturb the election itself from occurring successfully, right? Because the election is wide and is going to happen throughout the country, and GCOM has the power. So let's assume that there is disturbance in a village somewhere on the East Coast, or 3, 4, 5 polling stations somewhere on the East Coast. According to the laws, I understand it. I might be wrong. But as I understand it, GCOM has the power to hold election only in those areas at some future date. So to stop the entire election and prevent the election from happening, that's the capacity I'm talking about. But I'm not talking about the capacity for disturbance.
Sporadic post-election thing.
I'm not talking about post-election. Certainly they have the capacity for post-election violence. But I'm talking about preventing election from happening on September the 1st.
Okay, but I think
that is what I was
But I
talking
think
about.
Nascimento meant it broadly. He meant it, and I think he probably feels that they can make story after the election. I think that, but I think
that might be possible, but I don't see the need, and I don't think we should, something like that, I don't think we should prejudge. All who are preparing for elections and post-election counting and all of that, certainly we have had a history where we have had violence, and the police, the current president, all the political parties that are contesting should have that at the back of their mind. But so far ahead, I don't think we should predict that, because it comes over. Remember, again, there are racial connotations to this, right? And I would like us to be careful. The majority of supporters of the opposition are Afro-Guyanese. If we are not careful, we might be sending the message out there that Afro-Guyanese people are disruptive people, and no matter what, after an election you could expect disruptions. I want us to be careful not to transmit that message to the public. And so to prejudge,
you're right.
no, by saying that, it's kind of like saying, you know who them people is? You know who them black people is, you know, right? And so for that reason, especially if no other reason, I would want to be careful in prejudging because all we're doing is stigmatizing. We could end up stigmatizing by saying that, if you follow my logic, right? So what I'm saying is that all persons, all parties, the government, the police, everybody should prepare for these eventualities, because they have happened in the past. And we would be foolish not to prepare for it. But to prejudge a particular group for perpetuating it, I won't want to go there.
Nigel, you said we've moved on. You still have 2 months and 1 week for the elections. Nigel, you said clearly we have moved on.
But after he said that, he appeared on a program.
Yeah.
A program called Caribbean Tea with this guy who used to be a journalist in Guyana. His name isn't coming to mind right now, but he used to be a journalist in Guyana, and a very good one at that. I used to like him on thing. And Nigel Hughes and Aubrey Norton agree that there is still the possibility on that program, I think 2 days after he said we have moved on. And Aubrey Norton even said on that program that he is going to register 2 symbols, the APNU AFC symbol and the PNC symbol and the APNU symbol. You know that old APNU AFC symbol? Just in case. Nominate, because remember the symbols got to be registered and approved. And then move toward nomination day is the second event.
I saw the opening sequence of the program because my job.
Well, I don't know if he actually registered both. I have to check that out. But he said that.
I saw the opening sequence of the program, but I didn't know that was said. It's interesting what both of them said. Well, my contention is, my curiosity is, who is going to concede what? This is what I believe the PNC leadership wants, and I think Norton is the protagonist in that, because I knew how Norton felt in 2020 about the AFC getting so many seats. I knew long before 2015 how Norton felt about Raphael Trotman and Nigel Hughes. I know how certain PNC people felt, in Basil Williams, how he felt about certain people that were in the AFC. I believe the PNC wants organizations to come over and symbolically join the PNC. But their position is that come over, but don't give us no document that we have to sign that binds us to this and binds us to that. The first organization that conceded that is the WPA under Hines. Hines said, we are joining up with the PNC. That's it. It begins and ends there. My thinking is that the PNC is going to accept 3, 4, 5, 6 organizations coming over to it. It's going to be named APNU AFC. But I do not think the PNC is going to sign a document in which it's going to tie its hands in making decisions in certain directions. So if there is a covenant, I think the AFC has to surrender to the PNC the way the WPA has. We're coming over, end the story.
It would not be in the interest of the AFC to do that. Before doing that, and I am, let's say I am part of the AFC executive, I would fight for AFC. It might be too late to form a coalition with smaller parties, but it's better if AFC enter a joint agreement with Amanzo, VPAC and all these other smaller parties. Enter into a joint agreement and just move forward. But to go over to the PNC just like that, or to APNU without an agreement, and again, given the experience that these parties had together, that would be the death knell for the AFC, like final and simple. The AFC has to at least preserve for itself 7 seats. Even if you go over without an agreement on a sharing percentage, they have to at least seek to be where they were, or probably at least 1 seat better than they were in 2015. And at the very least, as it seems right now, they may have to concede that Jaretta will be the prime ministerial candidate to Norton.
So they would not get AFC wouldn't get the PM slot.
In a sense, yes. If you want to say, oh, Jaretta just came from the AFC and she's AFC stock and what have you, you could dress that up. just for AFC to feel whatever. But I could see them conceding to that a little, but they shouldn't concede to anything else. Maybe they concede saying, okay, if we win, the ministerial positions will be in a certain way or whatever. You can concede that. Let's put everything in a pot, and when we win, we will negotiate or whatever. But they should not negotiate anything less than 7 seats. That's how I would see it. Otherwise, the AFC wouldn't be worth anything.
But could you see them? Could you see the AFC doing what the WPA did? We're going to come in the election as one, and that's it.
No.
You can't see them.
No.
What?
And if they would do that, they would make it easier for the PPP. In fact, I am predicting a PPP win, but if they do that, they'll make it easier for the PPP to win. And I've said this on this program several times. Not everybody in the AFC, even Afro-Guyanese, are enamored with the PNC. And if they do that, they might even lose more of some of the membership they currently have. Right? That is my belief. That a lot of people would say,
so they have to.
they're not going.
They have to have a menu.
Yeah.
They have to have a menu of directions or a menu of choices. They have to present that before there is a merger.
In terms of?
They have to present to the PNC a menu. One of the menus you said is 7 seats. What else have they got in the menu?
No, well, what you did was to break it down to bare minimum, to bare bones. That here,
Yeah.
look, we just go in.
Yeah.
And I'm saying,
If you-
at the bare bones level, that is the minimum.
Right, 7 seats.
No, because AFC had already broken down to bare bones, and let me see, there were 3 basic demands AFC had on the table just before Jaretta was named behind their backs.
75-35.
75-35, Prime Minister and leader of the
75-25, can't be
list. 75-25.
Yeah.
No, was it 75-25? No, 65-35.
Yeah.
65-35, Prime Ministerial candidate and leader of the list, not being from either of the 2 parties. As it is right now, there is no way PNC conceding leader of the list. Even Granger came out the other day and said the presidential candidate got to be the leader of the list. So there's no way that one is gone. The only thing they're left with is prime ministerial candidate and 65-35. So if you're breaking that down to more bare bones than that, at the very least, forget the percentage, forget that, we must be guaranteed 7 seats.
65-25 is 7 seats?
No, 65-25 would have been like 65-35 would have been like 10 seats. 10 seats.
Okay. I can't see the PNC conceding 10.
10 seats providing they win back 32-31.
I can't see. No, but we don't know. But there have to be an agreement on either 7 or 10. And I can't be before the covenant takes place. And I can't see the PN. You were saying that the AFC is going into this merger by saying we must have 7 seats.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if the
Because Prime Minister
and
is
if the
gone,
P-
leader of
right,
the list
and
is
if the
gone.
PNC concedes that,
Mhm.
then you're going to have an AP and new AFC again. But what about you're leaving out a few things. You're leaving out one thing. The AFC will have to have people on the list.
Yeah.
They will have to have people on the list. And they will have to tell the PNC when the election is finished, these are the people we want as parliamentarians.
Right. So they would have to insist on that these 7 seats are people who we choose, and you cannot choose the people for us. Right? They will have to insist on that. right? And in order to extract 7 names, the number of names on a list, you could work out the 7 to a formula, which is going to be somewhere under more. 7 is going to be providing the starter one again. If the PNC got sense, they would agree to a percentage rather than a number, because the chances are, with Mohammed in the race, with all these other parties in the race, chances are that the opposition strength is going to be reduced in Parliament. And if AFC holds 7, that 7 could really turn out to be the 35 they're asking for.
Yeah.
Right? So it cut both ways.
But it's a danger. It's a danger. If they get substantial reduction, as you say, that 7 could be a huge part of the PNC gone when you look at the PNC representation in Parliament. So that may not work.
So AFC giving up all these things, I think PNC should just give them the 35 they're asking for and move on.
Maybe that is what.
So, and they said 35 throughout, which mean on the RDCs and all of that, right? They have not even asked for chairperson on 1 in every 3, 1/3. I don't think they asked for all
Before
of that.
we go, do you think that submission, that movement away from all that the AFC want, just the 7 seats, you think it's going to help them?
It's not going to.
You think they have their image?
It's not
People aren't
going
going to say, look.
Yeah.
Look what they become.
But having parliamentarians in the next parliament could help the AFC rebuild. But if they go on their own, if they risk going on their own and end up with 3 seats or 4 seats, the rebuilding process, we said on a program before this one that this is Ramchitan's last rodeo. He mightn't even be going back
I don't
in
think
Parliament.
Parliament.
Probably Trotman's last rodeo. I don't see Nigel Hughes going in Parliament with just a few seats. So I don't see Nigel Hughes being returned as leader. So it means then that AFC's entire team would have to be rebuilt. And having 7 seats in Parliament, riding on the back of APNU, gives you a better chance to rebuild than going on your own and getting 3 or 4 seats. You literally would have eroded your options to do that. So it makes sense for the AFC to be part of the coalition.
If they're part of the coalition and you have this AP and you AFC, where does that leave Simona Booms and Walton?
So I've already said on this program that each one of those candidates on their own can't make a dent. The only candidate that seems to be able to drum up some interest in people, to pique people's interest so far is Mohammed. And I believe Mohammed is getting all of that interest because the PPP created him. Right?
Yeah, that was a terrible
if the PPP
mistake by the PPP.
had left him alone, maybe he would have been.
Yeah, he was just, I don't know why they did that.
Right.
And I walk around this place, I drive around this place, people telling me, why the PPP doing this?
Right.
Why they keeping
So I
him?
think they built him.
Yeah.
Amanza got traction. Amanza is likable, but I don't think that will be transformed into votes. We have seen many likable candidates, but people are going to just say, they're going to feel like if I vote for Amanza, I'm going to waste my vote when I could easily have voted for the PNC or the AFC or one of them. That way my vote is good. So people are going to be hesitant. Even though Amanza has a profile and what have you, I think her profile could be best used inside of an established group. And that is just how I see it, right? It's not casting aspersion on Amanza's, her effort to be a presidential candidate.
It's not good optics to Nigel Hughes. So you wonder if you can trust him, but we gotta go. That man for the past 2 months is saying different things all the time. One time he said, I read it, that Norton is not electable. Then another time he said, we never deny Norton the consensus candidacy. Now he's saying we have moved on. Now we've gone to say there's still a possibility. Those are not good optics, but the optics here now is that we have to leave. Leonard, Craig and I were doing our dialogue, as you can see, we dissected the AFC, dissected Nagamutu, and we looked at the prospects of AFC, APNU coming back once again. Thanks for being with us. On Friday evening, we will have a guest. We wouldn't have call in. We hope to see you on Friday evening. On behalf of Leonard Craig, thanks for watching and viewing and listening to our interpretation of political phenomena in Guyana. Catch you later. Bye-bye.